Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm Walt Opie filling in for Kevin tonight, and happy to be here with you. I guess we will start now with the 20 minutes of meditation, and then I'll give a short talk, and hopefully we'll have time for a little discussion to hear how you're doing. So go ahead and find a comfortable upright posture. Um, Sitting with a sense of dignity and purpose, I like to say. Hopefully the sound is okay. I'll try to speak up. And just connect with that sense of the body sitting here. Feel the contact with the chair or the cushion. Feel the hands or the feet. So often we're kind of up in the control tower in our head, and we don't really connect fully with the felt sense of being in a body. So there's an invitation here to really connect with the body. And then also, if you like, connect with the breath, if that works for you. If not, some people don't like the breath. You're welcome to disregard this, but if you'd like, just breathing in, we know we're breathing in, and breathing out, we know we're breathing out. You can follow the breath wherever is comfortable for you. I've recently just kind of have a general sense as I'm breathing in, I'm breathing in. As I'm breathing out, I'm breathing out. I don't follow it at a very specific spot, maybe kind of like through the chest area, but this is one way of establishing mindfulness, just bringing our attention to each in-breath and out-breath. And we can also use the factor of investigation here, just noticing whether it's a long breath or a short breath. And you might notice any tension in the body that you could easily soften around or release as you sit here. We tend to carry a lot of tension in our head, our shoulders. You might relax the face, muscles in the face, loosen the jaw, drop the shoulders a little. Really relaxing, letting go of tension in the body as best as you can in this moment. Relaxing the arms, relaxing the legs. Staying in touch with each in breath and out breath. We can kind of let go a little on each out breath in particular. A little bit of an ah feeling as we breathe out. breathing in, kind of gathering up any tension we've been carrying, and breathing out, releasing that tension. If you start to feel sleepy at all, you can always open your eyes, take some deeper breaths. Some Tibetan teachers say, pull your ears. Just as you breathe, continue to let the body settle, calming bodily formations, calming the body. If your mind is really busy, that's totally normal, not a problem. You just notice the busy mind. Keep trying to settle the body first is probably a good first step. You might just notice what it is that's causing the mind to be so busy. Of course, there are plenty of good reasons for that. For now, we're trying to be more resting in the knowing of the thoughts, trying to lessen identifying with the thoughts. So if possible, just seeing these thoughts coming and going without being so caught up in them. Of course, that's easier said than done, but do your best. And whenever you notice that you are lost in a story or a plan, or memory, judgment, whatever it is, see if you can let it go just for now. You can finish planning after the meditation or finish remembering a story. Right now, we're just trying to be present with that sense of the body sitting here in real time and the breathing. What's it like to really stay with the next in-breath and the next out-breath? Just one half breath at a time. And if difficult thoughts or emotions do come up, we don't want to just push them away, meeting them with our mindfulness and a sense of kindness for ourselves, caring, interest. But then also noticing the impermanence of even these difficult thoughts or feelings, letting them fade away if they begin to do so. Coming back to the breath. And part of the practice is just staying steady and letting things settle as we go, trusting that settling will happen over the course of the meditation. So there's really not that much we need to do. It's more of just resting and being rather than doing. And the theme for tonight is letting go. So as you sit, just letting go of any clinging, anything that you notice you're holding on to that's not serving you. Just letting go. Hopefully you could hear the bell. I never know how it sounds on Zoom. But when you're ready, you can come open your eyes if they're closed and come back to the room, the Zoom room. And let's see. So I know that last week Kevin talked kind of a lot about what's going on in Ukraine in particular. I caught some of it. And of course, that's only intensifying. So terrible situation there. I guess from that, I was inspired to read a little something. There's a book that Gil Fronsdale did a few years ago. It's too brag. It's called The Buddha Before Buddhism, Wisdom from the Early Teachings. And so he, according to Gil, who I consider one of my teachers, according to Gil, these are some of the earliest teachings in Buddhism as far as scholars can tell. So you don't get a lot of lists. It's kind of interesting because who knows? It was 2,500 years ago and it wasn't written down until several hundred years after the fact. But anyway, this one, it's called The Discourse on Being Violent. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it and then talk about it and then talk about some other stuff. But and it's kind of like a poem. It says, violence gives birth to fear. Just look at people and their quarrels. I will speak of my dismay and the way that I was shaken. Seeing people thrashing about like fish in little water and seeing them feuding with each other, I became afraid. And the idea is this is the voice of the Buddha before his awakening. So seeing people feuding with each other, I became afraid. You don't hear the Buddha talk about becoming afraid very often, but very interesting. And it goes on, the world is completely without a core. Everywhere things are changing. This is maybe an insight. Wanting a place of my own, I saw nothing not already taken. I felt discontent at seeing only conflict to the very end. Then I saw an arrow here, hard to see, embedded in the heart. Pierced by this arrow, people dash about in all directions. When the arrow is pulled out, they don't run and they don't sink. So that's kind of a short description of his awakening. And what I think is really interesting is he's describing being in a very violent world and seeing conflict everywhere. And even in the suttas, there's definitely mention, there's all these kings he interacts with, and sometimes they're talking about going to war with another king, and they try to get the Buddha's advice on the best way to go about that. And there's even one time where he gives advice, like something about well, if they're living in harmony and discord, then it's going to be hard to defeat them, this kind of thing. And so then they actually used that and tried to create disharmony and discord in that kingdom or whatever before they attacked. So they even used the Buddha's wisdom against the poor people. So yeah, he was in a world not that dissimilar to ours. And so he was looking for a way out, a way of, a way. He saw that basically it wasn't really leading anywhere, and he was looking for something better. And then he saw this sort of arrow in the heart and found a way to pull it out. And that's the last line, they don't run and they don't sink, is kind of interesting. It's like we don't run away in fear and we don't sink out of dread, but we're able to sort of stand upright in the midst of it all. It's kind of how I'm reading that at the moment. And then it goes on to kind of give advice on how to practice, in the way that he's prescribing. It's a little long though, so I'm hesitant to just sit here and read it all to you. That could get kind of boring. Maybe I'll just read a little bit of it to give you a flavor. And apparently this next part was supposed to be recited regularly by monastics as part of their training. And this, to my knowledge, isn't done so much now, but this was what was indicated way back 2,500 years ago. So, because it says here the trainings are recited, and that's apparently what that meant, that recited regularly for training. So it says, don't pursue what the world's knotted up in. Having fully pierced sensuality, train in your own full release. Which will be letting go. Truthful, not impudent or deceitful, anger-free and never speaking divisively, a sage would overcome avarice and the evil of greed. I mean, it sounds a little tiny bit like, the big book or something. I mean, it's giving us advice on how to recover, He was like caught up in, he was in the warrior caste, born into the warrior caste in ancient India. So he could have easily ended up, fighting in these wars, but he went out looking for something else. Which actually is interesting. Personally, I grew up in a military family. My grandfather was a general during World War II, although he was training troops, so he didn't fight overseas. And then my father was like a captain in the National Guard or whatever. But for my whole life, he was always wearing a uniform and going off to weekend warrior maneuvers and stuff. And so it was kind of, I think that both my father and my grandfather wanted me to do some military stuff, but I was like a teenage pacifist, wannabe hippie. I was born too late to be a real hippie, but I was like reading all the books you would want to read and aspiring to being a hippie, not aspiring to being a soldier. So anyway, they even tried to force me to go to military college, and I just refused. Anyway, so I can relate to the Buddha's plight here is all I'm saying. And let's see, so that gets us, the language of that's a little bit hard to get through, so I'm not probably going to stop reading that, but just to give you a flavor. And I did think it was interesting because it says, one reason it made me think of recovery was truthful, not impudent or deceitful. And I do think that's one of the most important things that we have to learn in recovery, is how to be honest with ourselves, as not to mention everybody else. That was a big part of my early recovery in particular, because I got clean and sober when I was 21. So all of my drinking and using was done at an age where a lot of it was, the alcohol was illegal usually, I was very deceitful, as most of us probably were, but it was like every time I went out, I basically lied to my parents as a teen about where I was going and what I was doing. I would tell them I was going bowling because I was in a small town and there wasn't actually much to tell them I was going to do. It's like going to a movie or going bowling. I was like, so I'd tell them I was going bowling and almost never went bowling. And then I would come home and they would ask me what my bowling scores were. I remember the first time they did that, I was like, oh shit. I didn't, because I hadn't been bowling and I kind of couldn't remember what a good score was. So I think they were pretty much totally on to me, but anyway. So, but I think that these passages are powerful, and just to kind of put ourselves in the Buddha's shoes, and um, he was on a spiritual quest. And one line in here that I think is important. He says, "Violence gives birth to fear. Just look at people and their quarrels. I will speak of my dismay and the way that I was shaken." And Gil Fronsdale says that this word dismay here, the Pali word which he's translating, was samvega, which is often translated as spiritual urgency. Spiritual urgency. And that's been an important factor for me in recovery. This sense of spiritual urgency, because I knew I had a problem with my drinking and using for quite a while, and then I wasn't really ready to do anything about it, until it started to get pretty bad, like most of us. And but then in recovery too, I had to kind of work with, the spiritual urgency is what kept me going through the years. And it's often brought on by pain. We're like in some kind of pain. I didn't go on I was first taken to hear Jack Kornfield speak at Spirit Rock in 1993, I think, 92 or 93. And then I didn't meditate seriously. I would meditate periodically for like 12 years, because my life was kind of rolling along a little, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. But then it got kind of bad. And what did I do? I finally was like, they keep talking about retreats. Maybe I should try one of these things because that might help. And I finally went on my first retreat in 2005, having, I could have done it so much sooner. I don't know. I guess I didn't have enough spiritual urgency, but then I finally got some. And that first retreat basically changed my life, I would say. Because after that first retreat, I had no problem meditating every day. And I still, since 2005, it's pretty much been true, except for on really crazy days or something when I just don't have any time. So, which is pretty rare. And yeah, so it's been quite a journey since then. And I was talking to somebody else the other day who has over 30 years in recovery and has fairly recently found the Buddhist path and is really into it. And they were just talking about how you have to have, like the longer we stay sober, it almost feels like the more important it is to really figure out our spiritual path. At least it has been for me, and this person was saying it was for her. And that just kind of really resonated. The spiritual urgency also comes in because in Buddhism, it's often comes out of contemplation of death. The fact that we are going to die someday, and we don't know when that's going to be. So we need to use our time wisely now while we know we can. And I think of that too, and just in terms of being healthy at the moment, knock on wood, and having presence of mind to be able to practice with some sincerity and diligence. So this samvega is an interesting quality to cultivate, and there's a Buddhist monk, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who defines samvega. He says it's the first emotion you're supposed to bring to the training. One definition is the oppressive sense of shock, dismay, and alienation that come with realizing the futility and meaninglessness of life as it's normally lived. A chastening sense of our own complacency and foolishness in having let ourselves live so blindly, and an anxious sense of urgency in trying to find a way out of the meaningless cycle of like samsara. cycle of suffering. And so that's kind of intense, but I can't say I don't relate to it. I mean, um, in a way, that's what got me sober in the first place. I woke up in jail out of a blackout. So I didn't remember why I was in jail. I barely remember being dragged into the jail. and and I had sort of like a vision almost of when I woke up out of an alcoholic, my blood alcohol was really, really high. And I probably could have died of alcohol poisoning that night. And I kind of woke up out of a near death experience. Like, felt like I saw my whole life flash before my eyes a little bit. And what I saw was that my life was just heading into a black wall, and like a crash into a black wall, which I had literally just done. I crashed my car into a parked truck, which is good enough as a black wall. But yeah, I just saw that the way I was living really wasn't going to get me very far, and I wasn't probably going to live very long. And also, I might take out some other people in the process, which wouldn't be good either. So it was and fortunately, I honored that to a certain extent, at least enough to get sober. So anyway, this Samvig is an important quality. And the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about, was this idea, the theme of letting go, because I've been, as I mentioned, I've been a facilitator for this course. The course is really taught by Venerable Analayo. He's a popular monk scholar of today's times, and extremely brilliant guy. He speaks something like 12 languages, originally from Germany. I mean, I've heard him speak a bunch of these languages. It's not not just hearsay. And so I'm a facilitator for an online course of his on mindfulness of breathing. So you might have noticed tonight in the meditation there was a bit of an emphasis on that, the mindfulness of breathing. But in the mindfulness of breathing, it goes through 16 steps. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the last 4 steps are really about letting go. And I just think they apply, in many different ways. But it starts with seeing impermanence, which is a common theme in Buddhist circles. Is that everything that arises must also pass away is kind of a key Buddhist insight that we can have. And even in the passage I read, he talks about this. He says, where does he say it? Everywhere things are changing. And that's basically, he's just seeing impermanence, that everything's changing all the time, everywhere you look. So it may be slow, but it's changing. And so we start to, and what the important thing about impermanence is, when we see that everything that we're trying to kind of cling to for some sense of safety and security is actually impermanent, it's therefore it's not lasting. It's not going to give us the satisfaction we're looking for. And so we start to become disenchanted with it, which leads to the next factor or awakening theme, which is dispassion or fading away. We start to just realize, kind of like I had to do with my, my attachment to drinking and smoking pot and everything, was I started to see it wasn't serving me, and I had to let it go. I had to let go of it. And but first I had to become disenchanted with it, like realizing when I woke up in jail, this is not really a good lifestyle. I'm not gonna. I had my eye was swollen shut because my head went through the windshield in the crash, because I didn't have I wasn't wearing a seatbelt because I was thrown out of the bar. Anyway, that and I didn't know where my buddy was to drive me. And unfortunately, he had given me my car keys back after driving me to the bar. So I had even tried to not drive earlier that night. But then I was so drunk that at the end there, I didn't know any better. And so, that led, seeing my car the next day in a way was what led to disenchantment, because I saw my car was totaled and there was this big hole in the windshield where my head went. And you could almost like see where my head fit perfectly in the hole in the wind, because the windshield didn't go all the way out. It just kind of made a shape where my head had been, but the glass stayed put. So it was kind of intense, and that definitely led to some disenchantment, at least for that day, that period of time. And anyway, dispassion. Then I went to rehab, and that's where probably I got real dispassion, because I learned about alcoholism. And then I turned out my mother had never told me that her father died of alcoholism, and that it was like rampant in that side of our family. And to this day, I'm still finding out about crazy relatives that were alcoholics. And it's like, for example, we had my brother did the 23andMe thing, and then somebody contacted him and me through Facebook, and basically they were trying to find the father. This woman never knew who her father was, and it was, some distant, it was not that distant of a relation of ours. I won't go into that. But just kind of interesting. It took us a while to figure it out. It was kind of a fun detective moment. But then I saw a picture of this guy rolling into a party in a tux, and I was like, oh yeah, this got to be the guy. Like, you could just see something going on there. I don't know. All right, I'm digressing here, but so this dispassion, and then the cessation part. So there's impermanence, dispassion, cessation, and this all leads to letting go. And then we could be little letting go or big letting go. Big letting go would be into nirvana in Buddhism. That would be the big letting go. But I think these themes are just interesting in life in general, especially as applied to recovery. So cessation is letting things come to an end. We realize that because we've now learned that everything's impermanent, we also start to just see, so everything's impermanent, things are going to end. And we start actually noticing the endings of things. Because often we don't really look at the endings of things. We're more interested in the new, the fresh, the recently born, the exciting or whatever. And we're not paying that much attention to the ending of things. And you can interpret that any way you want, really, because it's sort of true all over the place. But I think that's very interesting. We tune into the ending of things. And then through this process, we start to learn that there's really nothing left to do but let go, because there's nothing to really hold on to. All these things that we were clinging to, we realize, like for me, alcohol was almost like my best friend for a while there. But at some point I realized it really wasn't such a great friend. I literally took a bottle of peppermint schnapps as my date to a party one night and told everybody, here's my date. It's like, it's pretty embarrassing now, but at the time I thought I was hilarious. But I literally was walking around as, I didn't have a date, I had a bottle. So yeah, it's pretty sad. But we may do this in different ways. For me, a lot of my sobriety, I've used sugar as kind of my go-to comfort item. And sorry, I'm not here to ruin if it's working for you, but what I found out, I went to the doctor and got tested and turned out to be pre-diabetic. This was not that long ago. And then I just realized, holy crap, I don't want to be full diabetic. So I need to really look at my sugar here. And I can't say I've been able to fully eliminate sugar, but I've definitely way reduced it and I feel better. But, it's another thing I've had to like let go of because I was really enjoying my chocolate chip cookies and things like that. But I just can't go there anymore in the same way. I might still have a cookie, but I never just had a cookie. um, so, and I find recovery, the more I'm around, there's always something new that I have to learn to let go of. um, at one point, I was just getting too much into the coffee, so I let it go for 3 months. Now I've been back drinking it, but with a little more uh, control or something. Control's the wrong word. Talking to the wrong crowd to say that I'm controlling my drinking, but anyway, you get the idea. There's always something I'm learning that I need to let go of. Letting go of anger, I've had to learn again. Not something I've done perfectly, but I used to really act out of anger way too much, and I had to learn how to work with that, let that go. Um, that's not a good way to be in the world. And you know, we've heard about letting go, and if you've gone to say 12-step meetings, like in the AA book, Big Book, page 58, it says, "With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely." And that gets read at the beginning of every single AA meeting, anyway, that I've ever been to. So, or on page 76 of the Big Book, "If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing." Or, so because it's just an acknowledgement that we tend to cling to things that we don't want to let go of. Um, Relationships were one of mine. I was had sort of an unhealthy relationship going along. I'm now married and it's a different situation, but this is a long time ago. But I remember I was in recovery, and it was just this like drama going on back. I will not go into the details, but one day I was riding in the car with a buddy of mine who I kind of looked up to at the time. And I was starting to talk to him about this drama again. And I guess he had thought had ended because it should have ended before. And he just kind of looked over at me. We hit a stop light, stopped the stoplight. And I was talking about this woman or whatever. And he just looked over and said, "Walt, this has gone on far too long." And it was so true. I couldn't deny it. And just the way he said it was so perfect. Like I still hear that voice in my head. This has gone on far too long. Because, I'm kind of an alcoholic and I can cling for far too long to all kinds of things, including unhealthy relationships. So fortunately, that was a turning point for that particular problem. And I went and started, at that time, I was not really practicing Buddhism, but I went and worked steps around relationship with a sponsor, and that ended up really helping. So anyway, and Kevin Griffin himself said in One Breath at a Time, as we work step 7, we confront the need to let go on many levels in our lives, letting go of destructive behaviors, letting go of negative thought patterns, letting go of ideas of who we are. At every stage of our practice, whether newly sober or old timers, whether beginning meditators or long-term practitioners, we face challenges. It's only through opening with humility to our pain and being willing to change, to let go, to find new ways of being, that we can continue to grow on the path to freedom. So, good reminders. And the time has kind of flown, so maybe now would be a good time to check in, open it up, and see if anybody has any questions or comments about what I've said so far, because I like hearing from you as well, not just me doing all the talking. Anybody want to either ask a question or share something about letting go or whatever else is on your mind? Spiritual urgency, maybe? Or questions about meditation as well? Mike, please go ahead.
Hey, Walt, I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic, and thanks for stepping up in Kevin's place to take the meeting. You know, you covered a lot of ground, and you started talking about the Ukraine, and you ended up with letting go. And you know, the situation in Ukraine is very troubling, and you know, it's tempting to be, you know, and it, you know, I guess you could file it under the category of outside issue, but it's you know, it's kind of a pervasive thing, you know, and in the context of letting go, I mean, you know, if we're going into a nuclear war, that's going to be the big letting go, you know what I mean? And so and you know, I think that cuts to kind of to the core of what you're talking about there. But what I wanted to mention to you folks is I got an email. Some of you might have gotten it as well. I don't know, but I'm on this distribution list, and so this fella sent out this email. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote about, you know, and I guess this might have come from his experience in Vietnam. I'm not sure now, but anyway, basically what he was saying was that in these kinds of situations, where it's very tempting to condemn what's happening and what these people are doing over there, you know, this fellow Putin and all that sort of thing, um, you have to look at it from the perspective. You can't just take the good, I guess is his point. You can't just be one with everything in the context of, I want to be one with the good part. You have to be one with that too, and you have to look at, you know, what is that in me, you know, what is, you know, and while you don't want to, you know, give people a blank check for being sociopaths or psychopaths, at the same time you kind of have to, you know, think about that you know, that we're all in this, we are in this, that, you know, that that and the only way out really is to to come to that realization, for everyone to come to that realization, you know. So it's a very challenging situation, at least, you know, from my limited perspective anyway. But again, thank you very much for covering all that ground and for stepping up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I certainly, well, I appreciate you bringing us back to what's going on in the world. And my idea around letting go, it was, well, the real connection was about the spiritual urgency, that these are very troubling times, and that there's not much we can really do about what's going on. At least, you know, we can give to some charities, and we can protest, and we can encourage our government to support the people of Ukraine and things like that. And please do those things. But there's also a certain sense of like, I don't feel like there's that much I can really do to like in this moment, so we could have a sense of despair or dismay that the Buddha even talked about in that passage I read at the beginning. But he used that for that sense of spiritual urgency that I'm talking about, that we can look for our own personal freedom in the face of this terrifying prospect of like nuclear war. And then letting go can really help us with our spiritual quest, is kind of my point, but and I'm not sure I made that point very clearly. So thank you for bringing this up. But yeah, that was my kind of idea in the back of my head when I brought all this up. And letting go just helps, obviously you bring in the serenity prayer as well, which has helped me a lot over the years. There's things, grant me the courage to change the things I can. And then basically we got to let go of that which we can't change. So again, the letting go part is just so important in our spiritual journey, I think. So I was just trying to highlight that because it gives me some peace of mind. It's like the Buddha talked about removing that arrow from the heart. And I think the way we do that is it's a type of letting go that we have to do. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate what you said about Thich Nhat Hanh too. There are a lot of teachings we could bring in from him right now. Dan, go ahead.
Thanks, Walt. I'd highly recommend everyone see, unless you have already, a documentary, a Netflix documentary called Winter on Fire, Ukraine's Fight for Freedom. And it's about 90 days in 2014 when they last fought for this freedom. Again, Winter on Fire, Ukraine's Fight for Freedom on Netflix. It's about a 90-minute documentary. What these folks are going through, these kids have been born since that revolution. They only know freedom. Anyway, there's so many things that are appalling. And again, I like all of us trying to find some seeds of empathy, compassion. What I'm trying to do is learn as much as I can so I can have genuine empathy for what's going on in terms of even the history of the place, and in terms of even talking to some Jewish friends of mine at the health club that everybody's got a little different perspective. I kind of base it on, because I've got some friends who seem to believe in ignorance is bliss. They don't have to worry about anything because they ain't thinking about anything. I'm taking the opposite tack. Know more. The more you know, the more you can share. The more you can share, the more others can know. It seems like that's what I've gotten out of my practice, and from guys like you and Kevin. But yeah, it's really been something. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I mean, I hear you. I've been watching the news quite a lot more than I was, trying to keep up with what's going on. And I was really saddened to hear that there have been so far 3 assassination attempts on President Zelensky that we know of, which is terrifying. Yeah, but anyway, I guess we're out of time, unless anybody had a burning desire to add to this or ask a question. Otherwise, thank you for your attention, and yeah, good to see everybody. Take care. And yeah.
Thanks, Walt.
Thanks so much, Walt.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
See you, mate.
Bye.
Cheers.